One hug from a stranger changed a shy little girl's night tan in the blink of an eye. It taught a billionaire father the true meaning of courage, kindness, and love. The ballroom glittered with golden lights that reflected off the tall chandeliers hanging above. Music floated through the air as wealthy guests in elegant dresses and sharp suits filled the room. Laughter and polite conversation mixed with the soft clinking of glasses. It was the kind of evening that was supposed to impress, the kind where everyone seemed larger than life. Among the crowd stood a man whose name was well known in business, circles a billionaire. Kay admired and sometimes envied, a man who could command any room with just his presence. But that night, he wasn't only a businessman. He was a father, and beside him, holding tightly to his hand, was his little daughter. She was dressed in a pale pink gown, her hair carefully done in neat curls, a tiny ribbon pinned at the side. To anyone else, she looked like a picture-perfect child, ready to enjoy the evening. But if you looked closer, her eyes told a different story. They were wide with worry, darting nervously from one stranger to another. Filled with the kind of fear only a child could carry when surrounded by too many faces, too much attention, and too much noise. She pressed herself close to her father's side. Hiding slightly behind his leg, whenever someone smiled at her or bent down to greet her, her father tried to reassure her. He patted her hand, whispered softly, and even bent down to her level to tell her everything was fine. He had faced boardrooms filled with hostile investors, made billion-dollar deals under impossible pressure, and stood firm against competitors trying to bring him down. Yet at that moment, all his power seemed useless. He couldn't make his little girl feel brave. He couldn't buy her courage. Soon, the music grew louder, and a group of children were invited to the dance floor. They giggled and twirled around, spinning to the beat of the lively tune played by the band. Parents clapped. Some pulled out phones to record. Others laughed proudly at their children's boldness. The billionaire gently encouraged his daughter to join, but she shook her head firmly. Her grip on his hand tightened, and she looked down at her shoes, refusing to move. Her cheeks turned pink with embarrassment as more eyes fell on her. Expecting her to dance like the other kids, the father gave a small smile to the other adults nearby, brushing off their curious looks, but inside, he felt helpless. He loved his daughter more than anything, but she was shy, painfully shy. And tonight, the spotlight of such a grand event seemed to crush her spirit even more. He wished he could shield her from every stare, every whisper, every moment of discomfort. But at the same time, he wished she could feel the joy the other children were experiencing, laughing and spinning without a care in the world, while the guests mingled and the children played. The staff moved quietly through the room. Waiters and waitresses carried trays of food and glasses, weaving politely between the wealthy guests who barely noticed them. Among them was a young waitress with kind eyes and a calm smile. She was not dressed in sparkling gowns or dripping in diamonds like the guests. She wore the simple black and white uniform of the staff. She was used to being invisible in rooms like this, but her eyes missed little. She noticed details others ignored, and that was why she noticed the little girl. She saw the way the child clung to her father's hand, the way her shoulders hunched, the way she tried to shrink into the background as if hoping to disappear. The waitress slowed her pace, watching for a moment longer, and her heart softened. She remembered being small herself, standing in a crowd of strangers and feeling the weight of eyes staring. She knew that kind of fear. And even though her job tonight was to serve drinks and clear tables, she couldn't shake the thought that the little girl looked like she needed someone, not someone rich or important, just someone gentle. The billionaire hadn't noticed her watching. His mind was too full of his daughter's silence. He crouched again and tried one more time to coax her. "It's just dancing, sweetheart," he murmured softly. "You don't have to be afraid." But the girl shook her head harder, eyes filling with tears. She didn't want to cry in front of so many people. She felt small and trapped. The more her father tried, the more embarrassed she became. It wasn't that she didn't want to dance deep down. She wished she could, but her fear had grown into something bigger than she could handle. The waitress, moving with quiet steps, passed near the girl and her father as she carried an empty tray back to the kitchen. For a brief second, her eyes met the girl's. She didn't speak. But she gave the child a warm smile, the kind that said, "I see you, and it's okay." The little girl blinked, surprised by the kindness from a stranger who didn't ask her to do anything, didn't expect her to be brave. Just a smile, simple and gentle. It was enough to make her breathe a little easier. But the moment was fleeting. Guests shifted, the music swelled, and the billionaire sighed, feeling more pressure as people whispered and glanced. He hated that the world could be so unforgiving, even to children. In that grand ballroom, filled with chandeliers, golden drapes, and polished marble floors, his daughter's quiet refusal to dance felt louder than the orchestra itself. He wanted to protect her, but he also wanted her to break free. And in that helplessness, he stood still, not knowing what to do next. The waitress returned, moving about her duties. But every so often her gaze flickered back to the little girl. Something in her heart told her this child didn't just need time, she needed a hand, someone to meet her where she was. The billionaire didn't realize it yet. But the night was about to change in a way no amount of wealth or planning could have predicted. And as the song changed, his laughter rang louder. The father remained unaware that a stranger in a waitress uniform was about to do something that would touch both him and his daughter, far more deeply than the glittering event ever could. The music grew louder, filling the entire ballroom with energy. Children spun across the shiny floor, their shoes clicking against the polished marble as they laughed and moved without a single care in the world. Adults clapped along, enjoying the sight of the children twirling in circles. The little girl, however, sat frozen in her chair near her father, her small hands balled into fists on her lap. She wished she could dance like the others. She wished she wasn't so afraid. But every time she even thought about standing up, her chest tightened and her legs felt like they were glued to the floor. Her father leaned close to her again, whispering encouragements only she could hear. "It's just a little dance, sweetheart. You'll enjoy it once you start." His voice was gentle, but it also carried a trace of hope. He wanted badly to see her happy, to see her enjoying herself, to see her being a child. She shook her head quickly and bit her lip. She didn't want to disappoint him, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Tears stung at her eyes, and she looked down, ashamed of her own fear. The billionaire felt a deep ache inside him. He could solve so many problems in the world with a single phone call, yet he couldn't solve this one for his daughter. He stroked her hair softly, hoping she would calm down. The people around him were too busy enjoying the night to notice the quiet struggle happening in that corner of the ballroom. But one person did notice. The waitress with kind eyes had been watching from a distance. She carried a tray of sparkling glasses, weaving gracefully between the guests. But her mind kept drifting back to the little girl. She remembered being scared as a child, sitting alone while everyone else played. It was the same look, the trembling hands, the downcast eyes, the way she seemed to shrink into herself. The waitress paused for a moment, heart tugging, before making a decision. She set her empty tray down on a nearby table and approached slowly, making sure not to alarm the girl. The little girl looked up when she sensed someone nearby. Instead of another well-dressed adult bending down to coax her or laugh at her shyness, she saw the waitress in her simple uniform. The young woman crouched down to the child's level, so her eyes met the girl's directly. Her smile was soft, patient, and not demanding. "Hey," the waitress said gently, her voice warm and calm. "Are you okay?" The girl hesitated. She wasn't used to strangers talking to her at such big events, especially not the staff. But something about the woman's tone was different. It wasn't loud. It wasn't pushy. It was the kind of voice that felt safe. Slowly, the girl nodded, though her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. The waitress tilted her head a little, as if she was letting the girl know that it was perfectly fine to be nervous. "It's a little scary sometimes, isn't it? All these people, all the music, everyone looking." She said it as if she truly understood. The little girl's eyes widened slightly. The stranger wasn't laughing at her. She was saying exactly what the girl had been feeling inside. For the first time that evening, the girl whispered, "I don't want to dance." The waitress nodded. "That's okay. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. But can I tell you a secret?" She leaned closer, pretending as if she was about to share something important. The girl's curiosity flickered. Most people out there are scared too, even if they don't show it. But when we try just a little, sometimes the fear gets smaller, even if it's just one step. The girl blinked. No one had ever explained it that way. Everyone else always said things like, "Be brave," or "Don't be shy." But this waitress wasn't telling her what to do, she was simply letting her know that being scared was normal. The billionaire, who had been watching quietly, was stunned. He had never seen anyone connect with his daughter like that, not even her expensive tutors or therapists. He didn't interrupt. Afraid that even the slightest word might break the fragile moment forming between them, the waitress extended her arms gently and said, "Can I give you a hug? Just a little one." The girl hesitated for only a second, then leaned forward. The hug was soft, warm, and safe, like wrapping up in a blanket on a cold day. She felt the tightness in her chest loosen just a little. She clung to the waitress, surprised at how good it felt to be understood. When they pulled back, the waitress smiled again. "See, that wasn't so scary. You were brave enough to do that. That means maybe you can be brave enough to try one little step, two, not the whole dance floor, just one step." The girl looked down at her shoes, thinking. For the first time that evening, she actually considered the possibility. Her father's heart swelled as he watched. He had been trying all night, but this simple, gentle woman had managed to reach his daughter in less than a minute. The waitress stood slowly and offered her hand. "If you want, I can go with you. We don't have to dance big like the others. We can just walk to the edge of the floor, and if you don't like it, we'll come back. How does that sound?" The little girl bit her lip but then nodded faintly. She reached out her small hand and placed it in the waitress's. Her father nearly gasped, his eyes misting with pride and disbelief. He had been ready to give up on the night, but suddenly, hope flickered. The crowd around them didn't notice much. But the billionaire couldn't take his eyes off the scene unfolding. The waitress bent low, whispering something else to his daughter that made her giggle softly. Her first real smile of the evening. It was small, but it was like a spark in the dark. The billionaire sat back in his chair, almost in awe. This wasn't about money or power. This wasn't about status or image. This was about kindness. The hug he had just witnessed had been worth more than any diamond in the room. As the music shifted into another lively tune, the little girl clutched the waitress's hand a little tighter. She was still scared, but now she wasn't alone. Her father leaned forward and whispered to the waitress, his voice low but full of gratitude. "Thank you." She only nodded, her focus still on the child beside her. She didn't do it for thanks. She didn't even think much about it. To her, it was just the right thing to do. But to the billionaire and his daughter, it was the moment everything began to change. The little girl's small hand rested in the waitress's palm, as if she was holding on to something much stronger than fingers. She was holding on to safety, to trust, to a promise that she would not be left alone in the middle of a crowd. The waitress gave her hand a gentle squeeze, smiling warmly. "Just one step," she whispered. The girl nodded, her heart thumping like a tiny drum inside her chest. Her father leaned forward in his chair, holding his breath as though the slightest sound might scare his daughter back into her shell. He had been through 1,000 high-stakes moments in his business life, moments where millions of dollars were on the line. But none of those ever made him feel as nervous as this one. All that mattered now was whether his daughter would take that first brave step. The waitress began walking slowly. Not toward the center of the dance floor, but just toward the edge, where the music echoed the loudest. And the other children spun around like colorful tops. She didn't pull or rush. She let the girls set the pace. The little shoes clicked softly against the marble floor as the girl walked beside her, her tiny hands still gripping tightly. She kept her eyes on the floor at first, afraid to look up at the people laughing and twirling. But the waitress kept leaning down and whispering little things, making her giggle every now and then. It was small, but each giggle untangled a little bit of the fear inside her. Finally, they reached the edge of the dance floor. The girl froze again, her body stiffening as her eyes darted around. The other children seemed so confident, moving without hesitation, their hair flying as they spun in circles. She felt like everyone would laugh if she joined them. She stepped back slightly, shaking her head. The waitress crouched down to her level once more, her voice calm and steady. "Remember what I said? Just one little step. Not dancing like the others, not spinning around, just a step." She placed her own foot forward, making it look playful. The girl watched, curious. The waitress smiled and said softly, "I'll do it first, and then you can try." She slid her foot gently across the floor, as if she were pretending to dance but without any big movements. The girl's lips twitched into the tiniest smile. It didn't look scary at all. It just looked fun. The father, sitting back and watching, felt a swell of pride rise inside him. He hadn't seen that smile all evening. He hadn't seen his daughter so curious, so willing in such a long time. Slowly, with trembling legs, the little girl lifted her foot and copied the waitress. Just one step. The moment she did it, the waitress clapped softly, her eyes lighting up as if the child had done something magnificent. "See, you did it? You're already braver than you think." The girl giggled, hiding her face behind her free hand for a second, but she didn't let go of the waitress. Something shifted in her chest. She had stepped forward and nothing bad happened. No one laughed. The world didn't collapse. In fact, the waitress looked proud of her. Her father looked like he might burst with joy. For the first time, she felt the tiniest spark of courage. The music picked up into a cheerful rhythm. "Okay." And the waitress swayed lightly side to side. "Want to try moving just a little more?" she asked softly. The girl hesitated, but then nodded. Together they swayed, just a people at the edge of the floor, not worrying about anyone else. The girl began to copy her movements, laughing nervously when her foot slipped, but the waitress just laughed with her. Soon the girl forgot about the people around her, began focusing only on the fun of moving. Her father couldn't believe what he was seeing. Only minutes ago, his daughter had been on the verge of tears, and now she was smiling, moving, and even laughing. His chest tightened, and he blinked quickly to keep his own tears from spilling. He felt like he was witnessing a miracle right before his eyes. The other children noticed her now. They weren't laughing at her. They were smiling, waving for her to join. A couple of them shuffled over, taking her hands and inviting her into their circle. The girl looked up at the waitress with wide eyes, as if silently asking, "Should I?" The waitress gave her an encouraging nod. "Go on. I'll be right here." And then, to everyone's surprise, including her, the girl let go of the waitress's hand and took a small step forward toward the other children. They welcomed her immediately, spinning her gently in their circle. Her first laugh rang out like a bell, pure and unguarded. The billionaire covered his mouth with his hand, overwhelmed by the sight. His little girl, the one who always hid behind him, was now twirling on the floor with the other children. She looked radiant, her pink dress spinning around her, her curls bouncing as she laughed. It wasn't a polished dance, not at all. It was clumsy and simple, but it was hers, and it was beautiful. The crowd around began to notice. Parents clapped along, smiling warmly at the shy girl who had finally found her courage. A few people glanced at the billionaire, whispering among themselves about how sweet it was, but he didn't hear them. All he could see was his daughter's joy. The waitress stayed at the edge of the floor, watching proudly. She didn't step into the spotlight. She didn't need to. This was the little girl's moment, and she wanted her to shine. Every time the girl glanced back, the waitress gave her a reassuring smile and a thumbs dash up. As the song ended, the girl came skipping back, cheeks flushed with happiness, eyes sparkling. She ran straight into her father's arms, hugging him tightly. "Daddy, I danced," she squealed, breathless with excitement. He wrapped his arms around her, pressing his cheek to her hair, his throat too tight to speak. He managed only a whisper. "Yes, sweetheart, you did. And I'm so proud of you." The waitress stood quietly nearby, pretending to busy herself with a tray, but the billionaire's eyes found her. Their gazes met, and in that instant, he felt something powerful, gratitude so deep that words could barely contain it. He gave her the smallest nod, his eyes glistening. The little girl pulled back and looked at the waitress. "Thank you," she said shyly, but her smile was bright. The waitress crouched down and tapped her nose lightly. "You did all the work. You were the brave one." The girl giggled again, her fear long forgotten, replaced by pride and joy. The father knew he would never forget this night. not because of the gala or the music or the fancy decorations, but because of this one moment where a stranger's kindness had turned his daughter's fear into courage. For the first time that evening, he felt that the wealth in his bank account meant nothing compared to the richness of what had just happened. He realized he had witnessed something money could never buy: a breakthrough, a spark of bravery, a new confidence in his daughter's heart. And as the band struck up the next song and the children rushed back onto the dance floor, the billionaire sat back in his chair, holding his daughter close, his heart swelling with gratitude and wonder. Something had shifted tonight, something that would never be the same again. The ballroom had quieted a little after the laughter and music, and the little girl now sat on her father's lap, cheeks still flushed from dancing, her eyes bright with excitement. She hugged him tightly, and he hugged her back, feeling a wave of pride and relief wash over him. For months, he had watched his daughter hesitate in social situations, always too shy to join in, too afraid to take part. He had tried everything: private tutors, therapists, lessons, and gentle encouragement, but nothing seemed to reach her the way a simple, kind gesture had tonight. He glanced around and saw the waitress standing nearby, quietly observing the scene, her calm presence giving the girl confidence without demanding anything in return. The father's heart swelled with gratitude. He had always believed that money could solve almost anything. The right tools, the right people, the right experiences could overcome nearly any obstacle. But tonight proved something different. Courage and confidence weren't bought. They were nurtured, often in unexpected ways, by people who cared in small but meaningful moments. He wanted to approach the waitress immediately, to thank her, but something made him pause. He didn't want to startle the little girl or draw attention to the moment too quickly. Meanwhile, the little girl could not stop talking. She described every tiny detail of her experience on the dance floor, her voice full of wonder. She told her father how the other children had clapped for her, how she had learned that taking just one small step could lead to so much joy, and how the waitress had made her feel safe. The father listened, nodding and smiling, feeling a mix of awe and humility. He realized he had been so focused on teaching her to be strong in the world that he had forgotten the importance of teaching her to trust others, to feel safe, and to take chances in her own time. The waitress, noticing the father's gaze, approached him cautiously. "Sir," she said softly, "I didn't mean to interfere. I just thought she might need a hand." Her voice was modest, almost shy. She didn't boast about what she had done, but the sincerity in her eyes was unmistakable. The billionaire shook his head, smiling warmly. "You didn't interfere. You helped her, and you've helped me too, in ways you might not even realize." He felt a lump in his throat. He had never been so moved by a simple act of kindness. He had spent his life surrounded by people who either wanted something from him or expected him to solve their problems. And yet here was someone who had given something priceless freely: a connection, understanding, and empathy. The waitress smiled faintly, shrugging as if it were nothing. "I just did what I thought was right." She was scared, and I remembered how it felt to be scared as a child. I wanted to help. Her words were simple, but to the father they carried weight far beyond what he had expected. She had given his daughter courage, and in doing so, she had shown him the kind of strength that money could never create. Curiosity got the better of him. He asked, "Tell me about yourself. How do you manage to stay so patient and kind?" She hesitated at first, clearly unused to attention from someone in his position, but then she began to speak. She told him about her life, the long hours at work, the responsibilities she carried at home, supporting her younger siblings, and the challenges she faced every day. Despite it all, she had a warmth in her heart, a capacity for kindness that never seemed to diminish. The father listened intently. In that moment, he realized how narrow his own perspective had been. He had surrounded himself with wealth, status, and people who measured success in numbers, deals, and possessions. He had forgotten that some of the most remarkable qualities in people, compassion, empathy, patience, did not come with a price tag. Here was someone living a life much harder than his own, yet shining with a richness of character he had rarely encountered. As he reflected, he noticed his daughter watching the interaction quietly. She was curious about this woman who had changed her night, who had helped her overcome fear. The little girl approached the waitress holding her father's hand. "Thank you again," she said softly. "I wouldn't have danced without you." Her words were sincere, full of admiration and gratitude. The waitress knelt to meet her at eye level. "You did all the hard work," she said. "I only helped a little. You were the brave one." The girl beamed, her confidence growing with each word. The father's chest felt tight with emotion as he watched the exchange. He realized that his daughter's courage was blooming not just because of him, but because someone had treated her with patience, respect, and understanding. The evening continued, but the billionaire could not stop thinking about the waitress. He saw the extraordinary value in her actions and in her character, something far more lasting than wealth or fame. He began to think about how he could support her and her family, not out of obligation, but out of deep respect for her heart and her integrity. It was a new kind of responsibility, one that went beyond money and influence, a responsibility to nurture kindness, to recognize it and to honor it. Meanwhile, the little girl stayed close to her father, her hands sometimes brushing against the waitress's as they moved through the ballroom. She no longer felt afraid, but empowered. The spark that had begun with a single hug had grown into a flame of confidence. Her laughter rang out freely, and she danced again, this time on her own, showing her father that the courage she had found was real and lasting. The billionaire reflected on his own life as he watched. He realized how often he had missed moments like this with his daughter. He had been busy with work, deals, and responsibilities, believing that he was giving her everything she needed. Yet the lesson tonight was clear. Connection, empathy, and patience were far more valuable than anything money could buy. He vowed silently to spend more time with her, to truly see her, and to nurture her in ways he had overlooked at the end of the evening. As guests began to leave and the music quieted, the father approached the waitress once more. "You have changed more than just my daughter's night," he said earnestly. "You've changed my perspective, and I want to make sure you know how much I appreciate you." She smiled, her hands folded politely in front of her. "I'm just glad I could help." He nodded, feeling that he wanted to do more than just offer words. He thought of ways he could support her family, perhaps through education, opportunities, or even small acts that could make a lasting difference. He realized that tonight had taught him that true wealth was measured not by money, but by the lives you touched and the difference you could make through kindness. The little girl tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, can we dance again tomorrow?" she asked, her eyes bright. He laughed softly, holding her close. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll dance together." As they walked toward the exit, the father looked back at the waitress one last time. Their eyes met, and he saw in her a reflection of the values he wanted to instill in his daughter: empathy, courage, and kindness. He knew that her influence would stay with them both long after this night was over. The ballroom, its glittering chandeliers and flowing music, faded into the background. What mattered now were the connections made, the courage discovered, and the lessons learned. One small act of kindness had not only changed the course of the little girl's night, but had also left a lasting impression on a father who had long believed that money could solve every problem. Tonight, he understood that some things were far more valuable than wealth, and as they stepped out into the cool night air, the billionaire held his daughter's hand tightly, grateful for the reminder that the simplest gestures often carry the greatest power. The waitress, watching from a distance, smiled softly, knowing she had made a real difference, quietly proud of the courage she had helped awaken. The little girl clung to her father's hand as they stepped out of the ballroom, the night air cool against her flushed cheeks. Her small laugh echoed softly as she recounted every moment from the dance floor, reliving her triumph in detail. The father smiled down at her, feeling a warmth in his chest that went beyond pride. This was joy, pure and simple, the kind that could not be bought. He watched her skipping slightly beside him, full of newfound confidence, and thought about the waitress who had made it all possible. The waitress was still in the ballroom, quietly collecting empty trays, but the father's mind kept returning to her. She had been so patient, so kind, so understanding. He realized that her small act had changed more than just his daughter's night, it had shifted something in him as well. For a moment, he considered how rare it was to meet someone like her. someone whose generosity came without expectation, someone who could influence the world not with wealth or status, but with heart. The next day, he could not stop thinking about her. He remembered every detail, the gentle smile, the calm voice, the way she had crouched to meet his daughter's eyes, the hug that had melted away months of fear. It seemed impossible that a single person, a stranger, could have such a profound impact in such a short time. He realized he wanted to do more than simply thank her. He wanted to show her that her compassion mattered, that it was recognized and valued. He arranged a meeting with her, inviting her to the family estate under the guise of a thank-you dinner. She hesitated at first, unsure why a billionaire would take such an interest in her life. Curiosity and a sense of trust built the night before led her to accept. When she arrived, the father greeted her warmly. "I wanted to see you again," he said sincerely. "Not just to thank you, but to make sure you know the difference you've made." They sat down together, and he spoke of his gratitude, but also of what he had learned from her. He told her about his realization that money could not buy everything, especially courage, empathy, or confidence. He admitted that he had spent too long believing that giving his daughter material things was the same as giving her support. He had never expected that a simple hug and kind words from someone who understood her would teach him more about parenting than all the experts he had employed. The waitress listened quietly, modest as ever. She was not seeking praise or reward, but the father insisted. He told her that her kindness had reminded him of the importance of human connection, of small acts of courage and care. He wanted to ensure that she and her family could benefit from opportunities she deserved, not as charity, but as recognition of her character and integrity. Over the next few weeks, the father arranged for support that would help the waitress's family. He provided educational resources for her younger siblings, opportunities for her to advance her career, and even some improvements to her home life that she had mentioned in passing. Every time he did something, he thought back to the night of the gala, to the hug, to the bravery his daughter had discovered with the waitress by her side. Meanwhile, the little girl continued to grow in confidence. She remembered that first hug and that first step onto the dance floor. She learned to trust herself more, to take small chances, and to embrace moments that once would have terrified her. Her laughter became more frequent, her steps bolder, her presence brighter. At school, she began participating more in class, raising her hand, joining activities, and making friends. At home, she sought out her father to share little adventures and discoveries, filling his days with joy and teaching him patience, humor, and love in ways he had not anticipated. The father noticed all these changes and realized that his daughter's growth was tied not only to his love and guidance, but also to the influence of the waitress's simple act. It was a reminder that sometimes the most profound lessons come from unexpected places, from people we might never meet again, from moments that seem ordinary but are extraordinary in their effect. The waitress herself experienced changes too. She continued working with dedication, but she did so with the knowledge that her actions had tangible meaning. She had touched lives in ways she never expected. The gratitude she received from the billionaire was not just a personal acknowledgement, but a reflection of the impact one person can have on another. She found herself more confident in her own choices, more aware of the power of small gestures, and more certain that kindness always mattered. Occasionally, the father invited the waitress and her family to special events, not as charity, but as a way to honor their bond and the lessons learned. The little girl and the waitress would share smiles and quiet laughter. A connection formed in a single evening that had grown into a lasting friendship. The father watched their interactions, understanding that some of life's most valuable gifts are not bought or planned. They are earned through empathy, courage, and connection. The gala had been intended as an evening of elegance and celebration, but for the billionaire, it became a moment of transformation. He learned that parenting was about more than providing comfort or wealth. It was about nurturing courage, celebrating small victories, and recognizing the value in every human connection. He discovered that influence could be found not in power or status, but in empathy, patience, and understanding. And most importantly, he saw that one simple hug could ripple through lives in ways he could never have predicted. Months passed, but the memory of that night remained vivid for all three of them. The little girl grew bolder with each passing day, carrying the confidence that had been sparked by the waitress's kindness. The father became more attentive, more present, and more humble, learning to value moments over material wealth. And the waitress continued to live her life with quiet dignity, knowing that one small act of empathy had changed the course of a child's confidence and a father's perspective in the end. It was not the gala, the music, or the grandeur that mattered. It was the connection, the courage discovered, and the recognition of humanity in a single act of kindness. Just like that. One evening in a glittering ballroom reshaped 3 lives forever. The billionaire often reflected on that night, remembering how a stranger's gentle presence had taught him lessons he would carry for a lifetime. His daughter's laughter, once timid and hesitant, now rang freely, and he felt grateful for the lesson that money could not buy bravery, love, or understanding. And for the little girl, the memory of that first dance, the supportive hand, and the warm hug remained etched in her heart as a symbol of what it meant to be brave, to trust, and to embrace the world with courage. And so, life continued, but with a quiet awareness that some of the most extraordinary changes happen in the simplest moments. The ballroom incident had been brief, yet its impact was lasting. A single act of kindness had bridged the gap between fear and confidence, between isolation and connection, between a father and his daughter, and between lives that might otherwise have never intersected. That one night had proven, in the most remarkable way, that compassion has the power to transform, uplift, and inspire, leaving traces in hearts forever.